Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon to everyone. Prof. Nordin, Dr. Rob, Prof. Asma, Prof. Basil, and all those in the virtual conference venue. Yeah. We would like, on behalf of the organizations, AKEPT, Higher Education Leadership Academy, and International Islamic University, would like to welcome everyone. At the moment, we've got 120 people coming in, and hopefully they will be listening through the YouTube or the FB link later on. This seminar is a collaboration between us, and we are very happy to welcome all the three speakers who are very internationally known speakers. Yeah, no need any background. I guess as a word of welcome, I would like to invite Prof. Nordin, Director of Higher Education Leadership Academy, to give few words of welcomings to the speakers and all the participants in the seminar. Please, Prof. Nordin.
Thank you, Dr. Zainal, for starting session 2 of AKEPT Talk, a Dialogue on Values-Based Education Series, or DOVE, and IUM for technically hosting a panel session. Yang berbahagia Profesor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, the Director of IUM, Profesor Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail, the President of Academy of Sciences Malaysia, ASM, Dr. Basil Mustafa, Nelson Mandela Fellow, and Senior Besar Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, OXIS, University of Oxford in the Kingdom, Mr. Rob Raymond, Founder President for Nexus Institute, the Netherlands, distinguished participants of the webinar, chairman and members of the university's boards of directors, the vice chancellors, the presidents of the university's senior management and officially registered Zoom conference room, and those who are following our webinar through the YouTube channel. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and salam sejahtera. Good afternoon for those in Malaysia, and good morning for those from Europe and UK. On behalf of AKEPT, the main organizer of this program, I wish to extend a warm welcome to all participants of the AKEPT Talk, Dialogue on Values-Based Education, Series 2, entitled Higher Education Post-COVID-19, Synergies among Science, Technology, and Humanities. This is the second session in a series of 3 programs lined up under the theme of Dialogue on Values-Based Education. We have conducted the first session last week under the title of Mainstreaming Values-Based Education in Universities. It was very interesting and engaging session that attended by more than 300 participants. In fact, probably Dr. Zainal will explain after this, but 100 participants stayed and remain after the session, after the formal session, well after the session closed. The detail about session 3 and the DOVE team will be announced later today. I would like to take this opportunity to thank IUM as AKEPT strategic partner in making this talk series a success. Thank you to IUM Sejahtera Center for Sustainability and Humanity, headed by Associate Professor Dr. Zainal Abidin, as the IUM's focal person in this strategic collaboration between AKEPT and IUM. To those from abroad or maybe new to Malaysia higher education scenario, AKEPT is one of the divisions under the Ministry of Higher Education Malaysia that focuses on identifying, compiling, profiling, developing, and sustaining the higher education leadership talent pool in Malaysia. We organize various programs, leadership and talent development programs for higher education leaders since our establishment in 2008. Ladies and gentlemen, AKEPT Talk is a series of intellectual discourses organized by AKEPT since 2016. It aims to provide a platform for leaders and potential leaders from higher education institutions in Malaysia to be exposed to the values of leadership so as to nurture them into successful leaders in academia. Through this talk series, participants gain knowledge on academic leadership, academic management, and institutional leadership from renowned experts. The structure of talk series of this kind varies from keynote addresses, talk shows, to panel sessions of various topics related to higher education. This is our 5th seminar this year that we organized, and the 3rd edition of the talk series. This is one of the changes that we had to implement because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we are very fortunate to have 3 prominent speakers who will continue our dialogue on values-based education according to their perspective, and then later we will have further conversation around the topic during discussion session. The 3 panelists are Mr. Rob Raymond, the founder president for Nexus Institute, a humanist think tank based in the Netherlands, and the author of the book entitled Nobility of Spirit, who will talk about humanizing education in human age. Professor Dr. Asma Ismail, the second speaker, who is currently the president of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, ASM, who will talk about integrating science and humanities in higher education. Most of us know Professor Dr. Asma has great knowledge and experience in higher education after so many years of service as the Vice Chancellor of University of Science Malaysia and USIM, and in between as the Director General of the Department of Higher Education at the Ministry of Higher Education Malaysia. Dr. Basil Mustafa, Senior Bursar and Nelson Mandela Fellow at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, University of Oxford, UK. Dr. Basil is a renowned speaker on values-based leadership and has contributed as a visiting professor at Azban Hashim International Business School, University of Technology of Malaysia some years ago. He will talk about synergies among science, technology, and humanities in post-COVID era. Thank you all speakers for making time to be with us this afternoon, or rather morning in the UK and Holland at the moment. Associate Professor Dr. Zainal, who will be the moderator today. Actually, he is the director for IAUM Sejahtera Center for Sustainability and Humanity. And thank you, Dr. Zainal, for taking up this tough job as a moderator today. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected through intricate networks in technology-laden environment, leadership has become exponentially more complex. This VUCA context, compounded by COVID-19 pandemic, has disrupted long-held leadership context or constructs. Current and future leaders now require new skills to lead competently in this rapidly iterating ecosystem. The latest discovery of sciences and technological advancements have been the drivers of the increased speed, connection, complexity, and interdisciplinary nature of our world today, which has opened doors for higher education leaders. These technological advances and changes have also diminished geographic, cultural, societal, and disciplinary boundaries, creating a new leadership environment. This transformative role of technology has given access to the greater world and uncovering the needs of the leader and the environment in which we operate, driving movements to address needs locally and globally. The inception of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, for instance, is such a movement where we have to come together to determine a holistic methodology to address the community and the world's pervasive problems, and more importantly, to bring the balance between technology, humanity, and spirituality. The issue that remains unanswered is how to strike the balance between technological and scientific advancement versus humanity and soul. The challenge is how to achieve what we meant, the ultimate aim of education, of nourishing, developing a socially acceptable and balanced personality, citizen, for the community, nation, and the world. I mentioned in my welcoming remarks in the first session, here comes the importance of values-based education, which is inseparable from education itself. Such an education consists of man-making and character-building programs, training of body, mind, and soul. So the real education should combine balanced science, technology, humanity, and ethics components. I think the main thrust of our discussion today probably around this balancing act between technologically advanced sciences and humanity. It should cut across all narrow barriers and help humans as whole to reach their destiny, which is greatness of innovation and the humbleness of soul. So it is indeed the responsibility of the drivers of education institution and the policymakers to ensure that the true north or the higher mission of education goals can be achieved. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope at the end of the program, participants will gain invaluable knowledge to cope with the challenges of leading institutions. It is hoped that the insights gained through the program shape the thought process of participants, which could then be used to drive sustainable growth of our institutions, formulating strategic direction and visioning to cope better with the changes and transformation needed, especially in post-COVID-19 era. With that, I would like to wish all participants every success in the program, and thank you again to IUM and Tan Sri Zoraza, especially IUM Sejahtera Center for co-organizing this program with AKEPT, and to all participants, not only in Malaysia, but also those who joining us from abroad in this AKEPT talk. I wish all of you the very best. We all in this together, inshallah. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Very much for very insightful introductions and background setting, as well as connections to the whole bigger picture of the 3 webinars that AKEPT is organizing with IUM. And this is the second session. The next session will be on Sustainable Development Goal. I'll be moderating the session for the next 1.5 hours. But given the continuity that we hope for all the 3 seminars, it is our plan that we would like to provide some background of those who just joined the sessions, maybe to get some background of what has been discussed in the previous sessions. For that, we have prepared a bit of a 2-minute video montage of important points, salient point that is being talked about by the 3 speakers in the last sessions. So for that, let's enjoy and recap and reflect the point that is being discussed by the 3 speakers in the last sessions.
When there is enough money, people who have got a lot of money, they cannot do much. Normally they go to developed countries to get themselves cured. That life will be one of the measurable, but we need also to talk about intangible, additional words that sees the balance are maintained life better beyond just livelihood and nature. So social values in goal at the end of the day is all about that, the balance, and we crafted in the word manifest a new kind of education that brings the rest of the kind of dog will live by it, and in the sense leading the moving forward. And that's the roadmap that we've done from IUM, already balanced graduate, and therefore they're employed.
I believe all of us very much incidental to say that science and technology are exploding when we look at our social. What about our social, cultural, and moral life? Serious societal diseases, murdering, and all other antisocial. man can fly in the sky like a bird, spreading his wings. The aim of education is nourishment. I quote Dr. Nordin, I like his words, building program, training of body.
Okay, that was some of the reflections and important point that was highlighted in the previous sessions. So we hope this round of the seminar, we could establish potential link so that you will be able to provide the whole bigger picture of the 3 seminars that we will be organizing. Yeah. All right, without further ado, so this today's webinar has been introduced by Prof. Nordin as well, will be on higher education post-COVID-19, synergies among science, technology, and humanities. A bit of intention behind was to somehow link and establish strong connections, integration, and synergies between science and humanities and technology, which bring in Rob when he was a keynote speaker when there was a launching of the GUNI report done in Barcelona last year. So that is one of the reasons why we bring in this time round the keynote himself, Dr. Rob Ryman, to share with us a very interesting topic that I guess many of us is looking forward to, humanizing higher education in human age. I guess Prof. Nordin also have introduced the background. Rob Ryman, who is the co-founder of Nexus. And to me, what is interesting about Rob's talk is that it's been translated into 2 books, Fight Against This Age on Fascisms and Humanisms, and the other book, which is translated into several languages, that is Nobility of Spirit. So without further ado, Rob, if you're ready, the screen is yours for the next 13 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, and a big thank to all the people, all our friends in Malaysia, who took the initiative to organize this webinar on a crucial topic. It's a pity that we do it through technology, but next time I hope we can meet all together in Malaysia. I guess there is no doubt that again we are facing a global crisis of our civilization. If you look at the political turmoil all over the world, in the West, we are facing the return of fascism. It's in Europe, it's in my country, the Netherlands, it's in America, it's in Brazil. The horrifying economic inequalities create a lot of social upheaval, and there are the ongoing wars. There are 25 million refugees right now with the pandemic, and there are the consequences of a man-made climate change. So all these crises together, a political crisis, a social crisis, an economic crisis, are part of this larger crisis, which is a crisis of civilization, a crisis of values, and with it, a crisis of our social order. And I guess it's important for everybody to realize that at the core of every crisis of civilization is a crisis in education. You cannot disconnect a crisis of civilization from a crisis in education. Something also horribly went wrong with education. Now, no crisis of civilization is unique. As old as mankind is, we have seen crises of civilization. And so history can tell us something. And so to listen what history can tell us, I would like to go back to Europe, to Florence, to Italy, to the end of the 14th and beginning of the 15th century. Because at that time in Florence, we will meet Machiavelli, the great political, moral philosopher, I guess globally known because of his small book, The Prince, but he did much more than that. Anyway, Machiavelli at that time is already, quote, unquote, unemployed. He's living in his own small cottage, reading his books, and he starts to reflect on what happened to the Roman Empire 1,000 years ago for him. The collapse of the Roman Empire in the 4th century. Because Machiavelli, at that time, like basically everybody in Europe, realized that for them, the Roman Empire was, quote unquote, the greatest civilization on earth. There was a common law, there was a common language, it was a great civilization, and it collapsed. And he wants to know why. And he realizes, way before the English historian Edward Gibbons, who wrote this book on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, Machiavelli comes to realize that the Roman Empire collapsed not because, quote unquote, of the barbarians outside the gate, but the barbarians inside the gate. The power elites there in Rome, in his view, became very materialistic, decadent, self-interested, quote unquote, it became a corrupt society. It was due to the corruption within the Roman Empire, among the elites, that this empire had to fall. And then he asks the second question. The second question is, how can you fight corruption? And he comes to the conclusion that you cannot fight corruption with rules and laws, a legal order, because that legal order, those laws and those rules will be corrupt as well. He realizes that corruption can only be stopped if the institutions on which a civilization has been built will go back, this is very important, will go back to their first principle. Political parties go back to your first principles. Liberals, for our time, liberals, let's go back to your first principle, what liberalism is all about. Socialists, go back to your first principle, what socialism is all about. Religion, go back to your first principle on what your religion is supposed all about. Education, go back to your first principle, what education is all about. That was his main conclusion. He writes about this in his book, The Discorsi. Go back to the first principle, because in those first principles you find a kind of spirit and energy with which you could build that civilization. Now, for the topic for our, let's go back to the first principle of a university. The first principle of a university is the idea of a university. And the idea of university is already in the name, it's universitas. The name university comes from the Latin universitas. That is the expression of the idea of university. And it's Latin for the total of knowledge to know about man and world, about spirit and nature, to do justice to the dignity of man. That was the whole idea. You have to have this kind of total knowledge expressed in the Latin word universitas to do justice to the dignity of man. Now, this is a European idea, and it was born out of a new mindset. The mindset of a small elite of poets and artists and thinkers who started to call themselves the humanists in the 14th and 15th century, around the time of Machiavelli. And the central figure, the father of the European humanists, is the poet Petrarch, Francesco Petrarch. Now, why did those people felt the need to have an education in universitas? And why do the founders of this idea of university call themselves humanists? First question, the education in universitas according to them, is needed for political reasons. Petrarch and his fellow humanists were reformers who came to the conclusion that the only way out to get out of this crisis of civilization, to get out of this political crisis, at the time, look, we are talking about a time where they just have had the Black Plague, which probably killed more than 50% of the population in Europe and also in Asia. But there was so much, the total destruction and fall down of institutions. To get out of this crisis, and also to get out of a crisis because the ruling class at that time had lost all its moral legitimacy. They were still in power, but they had lost their moral legitimacy. Anyway, so this education in the universitas is needed to have, quote unquote, to have well-educated people of high character with practical wisdom. That is what the idea of university is all about. You provide an universitas to have well-educated people of high character with practical wisdom who then can educate, advise, and reform the elites to have a society of responsible citizens. And they call themselves the humanists, Petrarch and the others, because for them, I mean, their founding heroes were people like philosophers like Socrates and Cicero. And Socrates and Cicero, with them, they realized that there is nothing more important, grand and mysterious than the human soul, our inner life, our moral being, and the world we create with it. And with Socrates, they knew that as soon as we know how to live life in the right way, we also have at least an idea how to build a good and just society for every human being. So they started to ask fundamental questions, but in a unique way, because they started to ask fundamental questions with saying, I. How do I know what is the meaning of life? What should I understand about my life and the world in which I live? What do I know about truth and goodness and beauty and love? This saying I is crucial because it's for the first time in European history that it's no longer religion-based, you just have to obey or to have faith, but it is the thinking man, him, herself, who starts to ask the big questions. What about me? What is it that I know? What is it that I can know, want to believe in? So with asking those fundamental questions and put the human person central, then the question is how can I find an answer to these big questions? And again, Socrates will help them because he had said, well, it starts with self-examination. It starts with looking into the mirror and start to question yourself. But also, you can do this self-examination with the studia of the Humanities, with the help of the Humanities. And the Humanities are the arts, and the study of the arts, and the philosophy. Why? Because in poetry, and in literature, and in music, and in paintings, but in history, all these works are a mirror of our own soul. And the language of the muses gives an expression to our deepest emotions, because we all know that our deepest emotions are where we fall silent, where we do not know what to say anymore. And it's in the language of the muses, it's in the arts that we find the words again, in poetry. And because of that, we have an understanding of ourselves, but also we can start to imagine it creates imagination. Science and technology never achieve any form of imagination, but poetry and the arts do. And because of your imagination, you can also have compassion, because you can start to understand other human beings and yourself. And philosophy we need for our quest for wisdom. Again, technology and science do not offer any wisdom. But philosophy does. It's the quest for wisdom. It's our capacity to make distinctions, to know what has value and what has not, what is meaningful and what is meaningless, what is truth and what is a lie. Now, to be able to philosophize, people should be able to think, to use reason, to be able to critical and to know ideas. And all of this demands that people are free. There is no real thinking without freedom. And here is where the circle comes around. Because the ultimate objective of having well-educated people of high character with practical wisdom is to have people who are free. But to be a person of high character means that you have yourself to be liberated of our own animal nature, of our lowest instincts, of our own fears and frustrations. But also you have to be free from indoctrination and ignorance, which means that education must aim at character formation through liberal education. Liberal education is the soul and heart of this idea of the Universitas, as it will make us free, as it will liberate us from the worst aspects of our human nature, and it will help us to be a free thinking, independent mind. Now, science was always part of the idea of the university, as the ideal of the Universitas knowledge demanded the free speculative investigation of the world, nature, and truth. Science is an inherent part of it. As an additional note, because, well, quote unquote now in Malaysia, what is interesting and important for our conversation is that although the idea of university and its Universitas was born in Europe, it could only be realized because of the Islam. It's only because of the Islam we could have this idea of the university. Why? Because the humanists, like Machiavelli, they wanted to go back to a first principle, which was for them the legacy of classical Rome and Athens, the works of Plato and Aristotle and Cicero and Galen. In those works, they knew they could find the answer to their own big questions. Yet, after the fall of the Roman Empire and the dark ages that followed, it was in the world of the Islam, but an enlightened humanistic Islam that cultivated reason and knowledge, that the classics of Rome and Athens, that the classics of the Roman Empire and Hellenism were conserved, translated, and then given back to the European humanists. So I think this is a very interesting and important point that everybody in the West and in the Islamic world should know. The idea of university, of the Universitas, indeed is a European idea, but it could never have been materialized if there would not have been the Islam at that time. Last but not least, it is no coincidence that the humanists, as the reformers in the 14th century, wanted to have this class of well-educated people of high character with practical wisdom, when in Europe we were finally getting our free republics, in which no longer a king or the church are the supreme rulers. And so here is a deep connection between the idea of university and the progress of societies towards democracy. no democracy can be without a true university, and societies which are not a democracy will by definition refuse to cultivate the idea of a university. So let me summarize what the idea of university means. First of all, it's a moral idea, aiming at the elevation of people, of having a just society, and the elevation of everybody, whatever gender, whatever social background, everybody should have access to this idea. At its center is the liberal education through knowledge of the humanities, philosophy, and the capacity to use reason to think, to become a free human being who cultivate the dignity of man, which of course is a very important difference with all kinds of religious schools, whether they are Christian or Jewish or Islam, because the difference with the religious education is that at the idea of the university, people have to think for themselves. And they have to be skeptical and critical, and only then they can do the leap of faith if they want, but it's meant to think for themselves. The knowledge of the universities implies the quest for truth about man and world and spirit and nature. Now, key is this education provided by a real university has to be the solid base, is the solid base for any further vocational training, whether it's in science, of nature, medicine, economics, politics, etc. Well-educated people will have a professional specialty, but they are always more than that. They are always more than that. Now, I guess that in all objectivity, we must conclude there are no universities anymore. There are no universities anymore. And forget Harvard, Stanford, Yale, whatever, they are all gone. What is left are thousands of organizations for vocational training, trade schools, still schools for religious education, but none of them is an expression of the idea of a university. At the core of the current civilizational crisis is indeed this crisis in education. Because if we still would have had a higher education that would do justice to the idea of university, I'm sure we would not face the many crises as we are now living in an inhuman age. Living in an inhuman age? Yes. Because the dehumanization in our global world is paramount. Dehumanization because of authoritarianism and religious fundamentalism that deprives people of their freedom and rights. Dehumanization because of wars, violence, homelessness, poverty and hunger that deprives people of their livelihood and security. Dehumanization when people are reduced to consumers living in a kitsch world which deprives them of their spirit and life of the mind. And dehumanization when technology dominates, which deprives people of their soul. And all of this was predicted. It was predicted almost 150 years ago by Friedrich Nietzsche, the great, philosopher in Swiss, who, when he was still a professor, he was very young, he became professor when he was 26, he was invited by the students at that time to give some lectures on, quote unquote, the future of education. And he did it, and he told them the following. He said, my dear beloved students, I pity you. I pity you. Because the school of civilization is over. Your whole education in this so-called university, and again, he was a professor himself, he said, is and will be reduced to everything what is good for the economy and what's good for the state. Nothing is more important, and the worst part of it is, you will be very happy with, because the only thing you're interested in is to make some money, and if possible, to make a lot of money. And so you will accept that your training will be nothing more than vocational and to be part of the economy and part of the management of a state. It was predicted in 1944 by the poet T.S. Eliot in his poem Choruses of the Rock, where he wrote the following verses. Where is the life we have lost in living? What is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? What is the knowledge we have lost in information? And please know that what is now presented as online education has nothing to do whatsoever with education. It's nothing more than providing a little bit of information, but it has nothing to do with education. Again, later, half a century, the French diplomat, politician, writer André Malraux in the 70s made this remark, a very wise but sad remark. He says, the most powerful civilization humanity has ever seen, our civilization, is capable of destroying the earth, but incapable of educating young people spiritually. So what happened? Why are we having a so-called higher education that has no connection whatsoever with the idea of university? And why is it that we are no longer striving to have well-educated people of high character with practical wisdom? I have 6. First of all, very short point. First of all, there has been the seduction of the idea of progress with science and technology. And as a consequence, the reduction of truth to an empirical truth. I mean, this all started with Descartes. Descartes had this idea of we needed a different paradigm to discover the truth of nature, which was a wonderful paradigm to have to develop the sciences of nature. But with it came a reduction of the truth, and he was questioned about this later by Giambattista Vico, who said, well, this is all wonderful, but it will not help us to discover the truth of human nature and of our society. But they lost that. So the seduction of the paradigm of science and technology as the ultimate truth, which makes any metaphysical truth and with the spiritual and moral values no longer university. The so-called humanities, in the attempt to be scientific, are nothing more than a kind of semi-science. And there is no longer the education in the universitas, because the academic world is now peopled by specialists, and you have to be a specialist to make your career, and with your career to get funding for your projects. But the knowledge of the academics, of the specialists, is so extremely small that in general they are the most ignorant people in the world. I mean, I saw this quote of Einstein. Einstein, yes, was one of the great, intellectuals, one of the great scholars. But he could have a conversation with Toscanini about music. He could have a correspondence with Freud about things going on. But that type of scholar, unfortunately, became very, 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 very rare. And they are even no longer welcome at the so-called universities. Second point, with the dominance of physics, technology, and materialism, and the loss of spiritual values, in particular, we lost the notion of quality. In our whole world, the notion of quality has been replaced by quantity. We are no longer interested in quality, we're only interested in quantity, because quantity is about numbers, and numbers you can measure. And what is good in the world of quantity? Well, that's the bigger number. So always the numbers has to become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Everything and everybody is reduced to a number. Third point, with the dominance of economics and nowadays commercial values, we became obsessed with usefulness, utility, and instrumentalism. Everything has to be useful. If it's not useful, and the economists can decide whether it's useful, yes or no. If it deserves funding, yes or no. If it's not useful, it can go. But our spiritual and moral values can never be reduced to what is useful, as their meaning is always an intrinsic value. Fourth point, basically happening in the US, but the poison is spreading. the dominance of the politics with its phenomenon of political correctness, which means that education is no longer focused on a quest for truth, but has become a social tool to deal with any kind of victimhood. My fifth point, too often higher education is now a kind of money machine. And again, that's especially the case for the so-called top universities in America. They are marketing tools, and that Harvard and Yale still have this program of leadership. When the financial crisis broke out in 2008, I wrote to both presidents of Harvard and Yale. I said, well, you can make a list of the people responsible for the financial crisis. They are all educated by the Harvard Law School and the Yale Law School. So what happened to your leadership program? No response. It's marketing propaganda, and it's just about to make money. Sixth and last point, nowadays power elites have an incentive to keep people ignorant. The so-called elites in our time are the last ones who are looking forward to be confronted with well-educated people of high character with practical wisdom. Because as soon as this class of people will be there, they will lose their position immediately. We are dealing with organized ignorance. Final point, 4 points, what's to be done? Well, let us be honest and let's call things by their name and admit we are no longer having institutes of a higher education that deserves the title university. At their best, they offer vocational training with which people can make a living, yet as explained, this has nothing to do with the idea of university. Second point, the last thing we need is a synergy between science, technology, and the humanities. Technology, too, has nothing to do with the idea of university, and science should no longer be the dominant paradigm of what truth and true knowledge is. Third point, no religion can be the dominant paradigm of a true university, as the ideal of a university demands a total freedom of reason and the quest for truth. To have a true university education is an exercise in questioning every given truth, developing a critical mind, learn how to think, learn how to read life, and only after that, out of a free choice, someone can decide to make the leap of faith into religion. But that's the last step. Fourth, last, obviously and most crucially, to end the intellectual, moral, political, and even religious corruption, higher education has to go back to its first principle and rebuild its educational program based on what the idea of university is all about, the cultivation of the universitas, because of the dignity of every human being on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. I was thinking all along, trying to find somehow what should I highlight as a point of continuity for the next speaker, Prof. Asma. But I guess there are too many of that, yeah. And I'm sure, and I'm looking at Prof. Asma has been listening very attentively. While Prof. Asma is preparing for the slide sharing, I guess there are several questions that was clearly highlighted that questions the role as university. And I think your statement, your remarks that there is no such universities anymore that reflect the actual ideas as to how you elaborated before. So that is a big question. And I guess that is one of the reasons why we are putting up this topic, for us to really reflect. If those are what universities are for, what are we having now is very far, by your definition, by your explanation, from what is supposed to be. Yeah. So I leave it that way first. Yeah. And we will leave all the questions and comments towards the end of the sessions in a dialogue way. So now I would like to invite Prof. Asma, the President's Academy of Science, who is, I guess, to add a bit of fun to it. Today is Prof. Asma's birthday. Yeah. So hopefully that will boost her to speak a lot more. Yeah? And Prof. Asma is President of Academy of Science. She was also ex Deputy Vice Chancellor before. And also we are quite proud to announce that Prof. Asma is with us now, International Islamic University. So with that remark, Prof, the screen is yours.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Clear? Dengar?
Yes, yes, Prof.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Very good morning to our colleagues in Netherlands and also in the UK. And a very good afternoon to everyone that is participating, including Prof. Nordin dan juga Tan Sri if you are around, Tan Sri Zul. So my topic today is on integrating science, technology and humanities in higher education, but I want to talk about the Malaysian experience. So at least our friends from the UK and Netherlands can essentially evaluate whether a university still does exist in Malaysia as well. There was some powerful talk that was delivered by Rob Raymond, and I thank you very much. He has put a lot of things in perspective for me in order to now proceed with what I have to say. Let me begin by saying that I'll be covering some of these topics, but let me start because of time. Let me start by saying that the world is changing and we need to keep pace with the challenges of the 21st century because of the pace of change due to the digital age, the disruptive technologies brought by Industry 4.0, the global economic crisis and the global competition due to globalization. But among all the disruptors that is there on the screen, none is as disruptive as the COVID-19 pandemic that basically have created a disruptive change in higher education. And it even changed how the world does science. This is what COVID-19 has done. Because with COVID-19, whatever that has not been addressed before, you've got to address the gap fast. And that to the point that we are now saying, oh, after COVID-19, we are now entering a new normal. And of course, Tan Sri Zul have always questioned whether this is a new normal or whether this is a renewed normal, in the sense that we've always had this, it's just that we didn't practice it. And therefore, we think it is a new normal. Well, during the time of COVID-19, while political leaders locked their borders, scientists basically shattered these borders, right, by creating global collaboration, unlike anything that we've seen before. And never do we see a time where researchers and experts across all disciplines in so many countries focus simultaneously on a single topic with such vigor and urgency, to the point that grants, public funds are all now focused to provide solution to COVID-19, and to the point that all other research has been put on hold because of physical distancing, because of lockdowns, and because of work from home restrictions. So we see, however, we see scientists showing shared responsibility, right, by repurposing their labs to better understand the virus. And engineers basically repurpose their design and production facility to now supply the much needed personal protective equipment, or PPE. So we now see an enhanced global collaboration in a global race to develop vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics for COVID-19. And we also now see an enhanced sharing of information and knowledge. Under the old normal, we usually would keep new discoveries and data from our competitors so that we have this information in our pocket and we are now in the lead and we can now get grants, promotions, and secure tenure. And only when we publish do we disclose our findings to the world. But you see a difference. During COVID-19, all this personal academic progress was basically set aside, and that information was shared on the fly. So now we have Zoom platform coming in, online repositories like what we have for medical and for biology. And people suddenly now, all these scientists have no qualms about making their studies and discoveries available to the world to read months ahead before the article is being reviewed or even published, right? So to the point now, scientists have risen to the occasion such that at the end game is now to provide a solution for everyone. The way to achieve that basically is to collaborate, because no one is an island now. We cannot work in silos now. So the idea is to collaborate in order that we design and develop what we call as the people's vaccine, diagnostics or therapeutics against COVID-19, because now we realize that an outbreak anywhere is a risk everywhere. An outbreak anywhere is a risk everywhere. So basically, everybody needs to be vaccinated against COVID-19. And therefore, there is a need to come up with a people's vaccine and not a vaccine that is available only to the elite. So despite, now this is important, Tan Sri, I think, was talking in the previous session 1 about KPI, and I think most of the lecturers listening will also be talking about key performance indicator, KPI, publish or perish, right? Despite of having this KPI, the need to publish hanging over our heads, the feeling of shared responsibility or values suddenly now is very strong. So much that whatever information that we have, we now share, because if we now work together, we can then help scientists worldwide to now act faster. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a new shift in paradigm. It is now a thinking that key results matters and not key performance that matters. All right, so it is the outcome, the impact. This is what matters. So when we see this, COVID-19 has actually made science seen as a global public good. And we also see civic heroism and good citizenry coming out from COVID-19. To combat the virus, we now see that a good healthcare system alone is not enough. You need to integrate health with social, with environmental care. All this must be integrated in an ecosystem. You know, no one is in a silo now. So the lack of care for the environment and awareness of the environment will lead to more zoonotic diseases being transferred to humans. We also see civic heroism among our health and social care workers who make extraordinary sacrifices on behalf of us. And we thank all of them for their sacrifice. We also see civic heroism among the bus and delivery drivers because now everything is going online. We have shop assistants, garbage collectors, all working overtime during the time of the lockdown that we have in Malaysia to continue to sacrifice and keep us safe. This is the concept of civic spiritedness or values, the spirit of shared responsibility, this solidarity, the spirit of sharing democratic knowledge, right, should not be only during the time of COVID, but it should be a lasting legacy that needs to extend beyond COVID-19 crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the spirit that we need now to capture and teach the future generation, the concept of good citizenry. And COVID-19 also now enhanced the convergence of knowledge. If you can now imagine the year 2025, and as a society, we now finally, 2025, we have a COVID vaccine that is safe and effective for all the various variants of COVID that we know of. And that we now have a rapid COVID-19 diagnostic test that has high specificity and sensitivity that can give results very fast within a few minutes or a few hours. And we also have a low-cost treatment for COVID-19, ensuring survival of most everyone who gets infected. The question then would be, would it be enough to stop future pandemic? If we have all this, a COVID vaccine, a COVID diagnostic test, and a low-cost treatment for COVID, would that be enough to stop future pandemic? And the answer is no, right? Because what we learned from COVID-19 boldly states that science and technology alone will not be enough to solve the global health problem, all right? And that the 21st century is the era of convergence, is the era where multidisciplinary has to come together, and is the era of melting of disciplines, or what we call transdisciplinary is now coming together. And what COVID-19 has taught us is that the countries who handle COVID-19 well, including Malaysia, Korea, Japan, and all that, we need to work in an integrated ecosystem and no longer in silos. So even leadership now, you need to have participatory leadership where you need consultancy from the social science, from the economies, from the scientists, from the public health people. All this now must come together to help the government make a decision how to go forward and handle the COVID-19 in your country. So basically, we are now at the stage of solving the problem for humanity and no longer about how each discipline can provide the solution. All right. So in short now, global, complex global issue require now an integrated system to connect the dots and provide solutions that can create a sustainable change. And to connect the dots, we therefore need a convergence of knowledge from the sciences and also from the other disciplines. So now comes to the crux of the question: integration of science, technology, and humanities in higher education. Okay, we talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. People are saying, yes, we have to be teaching STEM now. We have to ensure STEM is there in the schools, and also so that we in the university receiving the product from the schools know that they are already in STEM. But then again, you have people that says to you, why only stop at mathematics? What about STEMM? You know, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, medicine. Right, so we have that as well. And then why stop there? Another group will be saying, why not STEAM? Why not have arts to be inside there? And then another group is saying, why not STREAM? All right, and then all this, you know, R stands for religion. So why not we have all that coming in? So at the end of the day, all right, what did Rob Neyman say? Go back to principle one. So basically, you know, when we go back to what Einstein has to say, all disciplines of human knowledge are branches of the same tree, right? And basically, the vitality of the whole will depend on the strength of the foundation. So he says that the trunk of the tree represents basically the core from which we can draw the higher education, basically whatever is the academic study. So the trunk is the core. If you are studying engineering, the trunk will be mathematics and physics. If you're studying medicine, the trunk would be chemistry and biology. So that will be there. But the branches are religion, arts, the other sciences, social science, humanities, all that is all part of branches, right? And these are seen as disciplines and potential locations for integrations. But what's important is that as the branch grows away from the trunk, right, they are still integrally connected to the core strength of the whole, and they intersect, and of course these branches will intersect and tangle in new ways as they grow, and that's how we come up with double major, triple major, and all that. But all these are basically part and parcel of the same tree. But somewhere along the line we got lost with the need for specialization, right? And this need for specialization is driven basically by employment, driven by economy, all right? That has made now that particular discipline dominate the curriculum. And as a result, we say, okay, this is the way to go forward. And that's why we have the STEM, we have the STEAM, we have the STREAM. Everybody is now putting in their piece to make sure that this is the one being taught. But in actual fact, all this is in a continuum because they are all part of the same tree. So in US, I remember during my younger days in US, I've been educated in the US for my undergraduate and postgraduate. At the undergraduate, they give you broad foundation, all right? In the arts, in the science, and technology, humanities. My area is molecular biology, but I have to have political science, I have to have music appreciation, anthropology, psychology, all this I have to have, right? And these were all taught before I go into in-depth study or specialization. So basically in the US, in my undergraduate days, it was always already the norm to have integration of arts, science, and humanities. In fact, in the US, we are in the College of Arts and Science. It's never the College of Arts or never the College of Science. It's a College of Arts and Science. And as a result, we now see that because of this appreciation for the humanities, we now make a better doctor, we make a better researcher, we make a better engineer, because we are not solving engineering problem, we are solving the problem for humanity. And this is a very important one. And to the point that in US, the way they divide the curriculum is about 55% is about core, and 45% is about the other requirements that I mentioned about that needs to be able to complete the individual. So at Academy of Science, we believe that arts humanize the science, and therefore since 2018 we have included social science discipline as part of fellows of Academy of Science. And because when we are as a thought leader in science, we realize that if we want to make the policy, whatever strategies that we want to put forward to the government, it has to have the face of humanity to it. And that's why we have incorporated both the integration of arts and science and humanities. To the point that Academy now has initiated this year the Art Science Prize to encourage the integration and to allow people to be as creative as possible. So based on this, perhaps it's time to reset the higher education button. COVID-19 basically has taught us to take a step back and shift our attention to the big picture. If and when this COVID-19 is over, our world will change and the higher education probably will no longer be the same. But there is a need for us to rebuild a future that is more resilient, all right? And what more is the time, this is the opportunity. If based on this excuse of COVID-19, this is an opportunity for higher education to reset the button and probably see how we are functioning as a university and ensure something positive comes out from this. And if we were to reset the button, then higher education must be the one to play a major role to shape post-COVID-19 world, and do so by reshaping higher education itself. I think in the last series, Professor Karim had asked the question, how much prominence do we give to curriculum design? And I think at the end of the day, we all hear about this. We hear about Rob is going to talk. We're going to hear about Professor Basil is going to talk, Professor Mustafa. At the end of the day, we heard this first series about values-based. Everybody agreed to agree. At the end of the day, how are you going to have it done? If we don't change the curriculum, if the curriculum in the universities do not address values-based, all right, and address the fact that it should show the integration of science, technology, arts, and humanities, then nothing is going to change. And that's why I think it's very important that AKEPT is in there to help train the leaders of the university of the future to now see where is the way forward. So if we are going to do that, the question is therefore how? And this is where we always ask the question, when we ask the question, where is higher education in the future, we use this guide. Before we decide what kind of university we want, we must decide what kind of society to build. And we need to work with the end in mind. And the turnkey to transformation of knowledge and mindset change is always been education. Now, even if the layer of COVID-19 is removed, let's say we provide a solution to COVID-19, don't forget, we still have the disruptive technology of the challenges of Industry 4.0 is still there with us to create the disruptive change in higher education. And what we see that with Industry 4.0 and now lessons learned from COVID-19, we're back down to people and values, all right? People and values. And even Klaus Schwab had mentioned in WWF, the biggest, the biggest global issue is the continued erosion of trust. No, it's not about technology, but the continued erosion of trust. So therefore, there is a need for us now to inculcate values. And even if you're looking at this graph that shows the global agenda where we are talking about the new era of education and research paradigm, if we talk about development versus time, we now see that we have gone through the agricultural age, the industrial age, the knowledge-based economy, the bio-green that we are going through, and finally, endpoint is the humanization economy. And this is where we talk about wisdom, about moral, about spiritual, and basically this is the end game is to the future basically concentrate on outcome or impact to humanity. We are talking now about results. We are talking now about KRI, key results indicator, rather than just output or knowledge, which is performance-based, which is a KPI. So basically, the future is now result-oriented. Have we done what is needed? Because that's what wisdom is all about. Wisdom is not, wisdom is when you say, okay, I made the discovery. The question is, what have you done with that knowledge? That essentially, if you can create now an impact, that will be the wisdom that we're looking for. So endgame education has to be for public good. And higher education must engage in both the debates on the future of society as well as the future of education. And I think post-COVID world must be based on core values. And we talk about democracy just now, sharing of knowledge, make it accessible, available to all. We talk about trust, we talk about integrity, we talk about inclusiveness, and we talk about equity. Basically, we're talking about the SDG again. So as we move to the humanization age, the pursuing a democratic higher education, basically making knowledge available, accessible, and developing ethical and empathetic citizen, I think is a prerequisite for a fair, inclusive, and sustainable democratic society. And we need to work in partnership with SDGs in mind. And this basically, when we start to go into this game, this is the playing field for the integration of science, technology, arts, and humanities. So what about tomorrow's university? I think that question was asked to Tan Sri Zul in the first session. What is the university of the future? I think at the end of the day, the university of the future has got to be for public good. Rob Ryman had mentioned there is no such university now. I say, oh, okay, let's see whether Malaysian education is coming, at least bringing back universitas. So tomorrow is about the creation of a university that is going to be actively engaged with the life and problems of the community, of the society and environment. And the university has got to be values-based, that will use the knowledge that it has generated to provide solutions for public good and for a sustainable tomorrow. So this is my opinion. And of course, are you saying that no such university exists? Of course, there are already such universities in existence. Like for example, the APEX University of University Science, the APEX University, the title given to University Science Malaysia, that is there, and now definitely values-based, that is there to transform higher education for a sustainable tomorrow. And then we have UIAM. Tan Sri himself has also mentioned what UIAM, again, back to create balance, individual balance between knowledge and character. And with the advent of global economic crisis, this is the problem that we now face. With the advent of this global economic crisis, suddenly we now see the need for income generation, or neoliberal entrepreneurial universities now become a dominant move among the public universities. Once we start to do this, once we start to move public universities to be income generating, I think we're going to now see some differences regarding what is the core business of what a public university is all about. And when we move public universities to generate income, we will enhance inequalities and reduce the sense of public purpose that was there as the main reason why a public university versus a private university. And if we are not careful, as Rob Ryman had mentioned, students will just see this university as a place to gain career-related skills or credential, just for vocational training, just to get a degree and just to move on with life, and not a place to shape the minds of the future, or to nurture us to be a complete human being. So if being a university for public good is the right direction, how do we now ensure what needs to happen does happen? So this, I would like to share the Malaysian experience, and I will welcome our colleagues from Netherlands and from UK to also comment on what is happening with the Malaysian education. Before COVID-19, in 2013 itself, we already realized that globalization, digital age, and economic crisis will create a tsunami effect on higher education. We know that. And therefore, to provide the best education for Malaysia's future generation, we realize that Malaysian higher education system must evolve both in response to the global trend as well as in preparation for further disruption. Needless that we know that we are going to face disruption of COVID-19 in the year 2020. So both public and private higher education need to harmonize and work together towards unity and nation building. If you ask me the question, what is it going back to as the first principle, we have Falsafah Pendidikan Negara, which is the national education philosophy, as the principle that that we can always go back to. And therefore, we ask the question, before we redesign higher education, we ask what kind of future generation we want. And after much deliberation, Malaysian higher education blueprint came up with this, that we want to create learned, values-based talent that is holistic, that is entrepreneurial, that is knowledgeable, and that is balanced, right? At the same time, be flexible, adaptable, and relevant to meet the 21st century challenges. Basically, end game, we want our future generation to be balanced between character and knowledge, and that we believe that education is about humanizing the student. This slide was done in 2015, during the time when I was the Director General for Higher Education. This is before we're talking about COVID and the impact of post-COVID on higher education. This is what we had in mind. This is Malaysia having his blueprint, which is passed by Cabinet, that guarantees the future generations of Malaysia will now be balanced between character and knowledge. And that we want our education system to move from the training of human capital to nurturing a human being. And that is why in the blueprint, we have removed anything that is called human capital is no longer there. Everything is converted to talent or human being. So this is how important it is. And yet, we have many people who write the political speeches are still using human capital, without even knowing what exactly this is all about and what is the implication of using that particular word. So in short, we want to bring back soul to the Malaysian education system by design and no longer by chance. Because if you have this in the blueprint, it is actually guaranteed that the ministry will unlock the policies that will now ensure that this will happen. And if this is going to happen, then we have to have this mantra of learn, unlearn, relearn, and then co-learn because of global collaboration and co-creating something together. And this is the Malaysian Education Blueprint 2015 to 2025 that supports, that has 10 shifts that will support the attainment of system and student aspiration. And we have the Malaysian Education Blueprint for the schools that is now seamless as well with the Malaysian Education Blueprint for higher education, so that we now see this from cradle to grave as basically a seamless affair. And of course, the question in the creation of learned values-driven talent, I think UNESCO, when they were studying the blueprint, have always asked this question, how are you going to do this, right? How do you go in two things? How are you going to do this? And how are you going to measure that the student actually show the kind of values education that you're talking about? So, of course, we'll talk about entrepreneurial, we talk about the CEO faculty to create the entrepreneurial, and we then say, let's not create job seekers, but let's create job creators that has emphasis on values. But I will come back to two important points that I raised just now. How do you make sure values-based education is happening? And that is experiential learning or service learning, because you can do, because the blueprint actually advocated for blended learning that is having some that is online, but some that is now experiential, because nothing we learn from experiential learning. And we do this by community engagement. This is part and parcel by either voluntarism and community engagement, which is supposed to be part and parcel of the curriculum, not something as an elective, not something which the Malay call PMTP, but basically it has to be part and parcel of the curriculum. The community engagement, essentially, when we do this, it will offer the universities the opportunity to inculcate values and good citizenry among our future generation, because they will now go in and actually interact with the community, and they will have to listen to what exactly does the community want, rather than they tell the community what it is. So, and there is a need, when we start to do this, it will restore social relevance and obligation to society, and hopefully reduce the inequity divide by producing meaningful knowledge to serve the marginalized or the bottom billion, who makes up more than 2/3 of the world population. And what we are saying here is that when we undergo community engagement, we will embrace partnership guided by mutual respect, not by one-way transfer. Used to be, we call it knowledge transfer. But now we say knowledge it takes a whole village to educate a child. And basically this is a two-way street. We are learning from the community as much as the community is learning from us. And therefore, at the end of the day, it's talking about knowledge assimilation, moving now to knowledge for change. And this is the end game. And that when we go in for community engagement, basically students from various disciplines are now coming together, working together to provide the solution needed by the community. So the next question is, of course, how do you measure values and intangibles like leadership, entrepreneurial, communication skills, social skills, all that? How do you measure and put that? And we challenged the professors in Malaysia at that time in 2013, before we released in 2015, is the use of integrated CGPA. The challenge to the professors who helped to design this was that if you get a CGPA of 4.0, does that mean you are a wholesome individual? Should be that if you are a 4.0 graduate, you're not only very good in academy, you also have high character and wisdom. That is what we think it should be. That is where when you say you have a CGPA of 4.0, we salute you, because this is the kind of graduate that we want to be a role model for society. This is the kind of good citizens that we want to be as part and parcel of Malaysia. So this is ICGPA, where we then have the various knowledge, practical skills all there, and that is being measured by the peers, by the students themselves, to now come up with an integrated CGPA. And basically there is a rubric to how this is being done, which I don't have time to discuss, but it's available on KPT website if you're interested in ICGPA. When I presented this to UNESCO, this is exactly what they had wanted before, because there is a need now to come up with how do you measure these kind of values and integrate that as part and parcel of the academic curriculum. Next Malaysian experience is to change the way we do research in the country, right? We also change policies on research to show integration of science, technology, and humanity. Right now, we understand that there are going to be new trends for research that is going to be using a lot of artificial intelligence and hyperconnectivity, and to have everything under IoT and all that. There is also a need to show enhancement in transdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research. And with the advent of digital era, there is a need to enhance accessibility to ideas and data. And that's why we're moving and pushing for open science platform, which when we say Malaysian open science platform is also inclusive of social science and humanities to be part and parcel of the knowledge that is now part of the open science platform. And enhance collaboration and information sharing and linking of research priorities to demonstrate impact. This is where we say there is a need to shift the mindset. If we continue to say KPI, KPI, we're talking again, as Rob says, about numbers, right? Where is the quality? Where is the impact that you have now created? So we are now changing, say, okay, impact is the effect of research that has gone beyond academia, and it has to be demonstrable. Right? Impact is not about how to develop the vaccine or finding the discovery of the biomarkers to make the vaccine, but rather whether the newly developed vaccine was able to reduce the spread of the disease among the population. This is what we are driving for, results driven. So impact will shift from pure research excellence towards a focus on research dissemination and awareness and its effect on a wider society. And this is where the grant funders, government will be looking for impact. And now we're looking not for ROI, but ROV, return of value, by making sure at least 3 universities must collaborate with multidisciplines involved to provide impactful solution. What we want to see is synergy beyond each discipline and want to see results and not just performance. And we realize that if we want results, there is a need to create a driver that will now close the gap between the R&D priorities and the socio-economic goals. And if we don't do this, it will continue to be a lot of money spent on R&D, but the rakyat or the society or the civil society will still be asking, what have the universities done for us? And this is where Academy Science, together with Monash University, comes up with the 10 on 10 framework that will now guide to make sure that science and technology on the left will now be able to drive Malaysia's socio-economic drivers. Science and technology drivers are what Academy of Science have predicted as the emerging technologies of the future, and this is now backed also by global patent analysis to now say this will be the technology that is going to move forward the country, in fact the world, but it has to be now driving the Malaysia's socio-economic drivers. So we hope now to be able to see the blend of science, technology and arts, humanities now to be able to move the agenda. And this is what we are saying now, to link the technology driver to socio-economic driver for value creation. And last but not least is to share with you the Malaysian experience on Malaysian Research University. 5 research universities are there, 4 UM, UKM, USM, UPM in 2006, with UTM receiving the RU status in 2010. And we have already the 10th anniversary in 2017. Now we are 13 years of age, the Malaysian Research University, with the mission and vision to be what is needed to drive the economy and social well-being of the country. But what I want to state here is that, yes, we talk about ranking, but Malaysian universities, especially for the research university, we have the Malaysian Research Assessment, or MIRA, that is for rating, not ranking, rating purposes, to basically pace the research universities. And the criteria for management has talk about talent, research, prominence, wealth creation. Most top universities, when they talk about ranking, is always working on the triple helix, 1, 2, and 3. But Malaysian RU, from the time that it was first initiated, has always talked about the quadruple helix. That means it is the bridging, how now Malaysian Research University will create the knowledge for public good and show the kind of impact that is needed. That essentially, a lot of people have forgotten about this, and they pick up only the fact that MIRA was used for KPI. MIRA, when it was designed, was never meant for KPI of individuals to allow for performance for them to become associate professor or professor. This is to pace the institution. So this is what the original and what it should be, because what has gone wrong is another matter altogether. So what I want to share with you is that this is the latest in terms of ranking, where we see all 5 RUs now, after 13 years, of all these 5 RUs now, from nowhere in 2006 to now become the top 200 universities, if you agree with ranking. But at least 4 of the 5 RUs are already in the top 150. So what we are trying to say here is that while most top ranked universities concentrate on the triple helix, Malaysian RUs are different. We are values-based, and we concentrate to deliver impact to humanity by working on the quadruple helix. This is something that has not been there as part and measurement of the QS ranking, but it is part and parcel of MIRA rating. That is why we want to push MIRA to be the one that is now evaluating for Malaysian University, and by working on the quadruple helix to create impact to SDG via the integration of science, technology, and humanities. This, ladies and gentlemen, with the concept that we have shown for the research university, is the concept of high-tech, high-touch, practiced by the Malaysian Research University. Because every time when we have a solution by the research university, integration of science, art, technology, humanities, always this high-tech is now converted to something that is high-touch, that can now be made available, accessible, affordable, and of quality to the people who need them most. So SDG is being practiced here. So what I want to show here is that it is possible for universities to be recognized by balancing KPI and KIP. KIP is key intangible performance, the values base that we are talking about. So now we hope that in the future, we will collapse the KPI and the KIP and now move basically to key result, which is impact at the end of the day. What have you done with the knowledge? That in essence is wisdom. So with that, I thank you very much for the time of the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. You have a lot of comment in the chat box, but they all wish birthday to you.
Okay.
Anyway, this is a very interesting presentation that I guess reflects what Rob is sharing before, which I think now we see how there are universities striving to bring back that component of humanisms that Rob is talking about. That will be the dialogue that will be bring up towards the end of the discussions. In the interest of time, I would like to invite Dr. Basil to share his insights on this topic, which I think more emphasizing on the synergies aspect between the three components. Prof. Basil, the screen is yours.
Thank you all, guests and participants, for joining us today. The topic of my presentation is about higher education post-COVID-19, and more specifically about the synergies between science, technology, and humanities. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can, Prof. We are sharing your slide too.
The purpose of the presentation is really to offer some reflections today, which I hope will encourage and stimulate some discussions, and also how to move forward. The first part of the presentation will offer a utilitarian view of the role of the organization entity which we call university, and its perpetual endeavor to explore and understand the human condition. The second part of the presentation will be about some of the challenges. I was just reflecting on the first slide, which was about this: what does higher education do to society? And as I was saying, the utilitarian view is that it serves public benefit by advancing the acquisition of knowledge and skills. Thus, it fulfills a vital role in producing high quality human capital resource which national economies depend on. However, in this case, the cost of higher education is seen as a national investment that will improve the nation's productivity and enhance social and economic development. The second slide, if we look deeper at the human capital theory, we will find that it really relates productivity to more than just the physical assets of the people working for an organization. It also addresses the entire set of tangible as well as intangible qualities that people could bring to the organization. And that includes their education, their skills, but it also includes their creativity, their health, and also their moral character. Now, there is another dimension in addition to social capital and human capital theories, and that is what we call the spiritual capital. And it's like the third leg of a stool, and one could refer to the work of the Nobel laureate economist Robert Fogel on the concept of spiritual capital. It was broadly defined as the immaterial assets constituting self-realization of the individual, work ethic, family ethic, and religious moral teachings. All these could be of benefit to society and specifically to social and economic development. And I will come back to this religious moral teachings in a later slide. The purpose of the humanities is to promote a more equitable, responsible, and democratic society by searching for the notion of value. And the more recent international meeting of the Global University Network for Innovation in 2018 called for closer integration in the curriculum between science, technology, and the humanities. And I believe that the rector of the IIUM, Professor Zulkifli Abdul Razak, was a signatory to that agreement. Now, the study of the humanities is often criticized for not providing training in a job skill. That's what humanities is criticized for, even though it does provide for other abilities, such as critical thinking and knowledge of the human experience. And you know how the joke goes when a student was saying, I was thinking of doing history in university, but I couldn't see any future studies in it. So that's the stereotype, or stereotypical view of the study of humanities in institutions of higher education. What's in it for me? How will it promote my future earnings? That kind of debate goes on. Now, institutions of higher education have an important role in progressing the knowledge society, and in particular, its knowledge economy. Now, if we want to create a society with knowledge culture, then this will demand two preconditions, and that is freedom from fear and freedom from want. These are this is the premise of the human security concept. Freedom from fear entails freedom of expression and freedom of association, equality, and also freedom from persecution. Freedom from want entails, of course, the eradication of poverty, equitable distribution of wealth, and access to health and education services. So fostering a knowledge culture in society basically requires the protection and empowerment of human beings. And universities, in my view, even given their limited utilitarian service, universities could play a leading role in nurturing this environment, promoting it, arguing for it. There is, however, an important point to raise at this stage, and that is gaining knowledge is a value-driven goal. It requires values-based leadership competencies. Now, there are universal human values: integrity, trust, human dignity, the common good, empathy, and respect are but a few ones that we could mention. Now, learners should be inspired by these universal human values that I have just mentioned, just as they are keen and inspired to achieve a scholarly qualification from the university. And here is where it is the university's role to ensure that the learners, whoever they are, and I don't rule out even faculty to be, in a way, learners, to ensure that they understand this idea that gaining knowledge is a value-driven goal, and it does not just exist in vacuum or for a very restricted objective. If we want to learn by contrast, then it's the story that I always give of the Chief Executive Officer of Enron, Jeffrey Skilling, and some of you might have heard about the story. He was the disgraced Enron Chief Executive. However, looking at his background, he earned his MBA in one of the best training schools, that is Harvard Business School. That did not prevent him from believing, as it was reported, that money and fear were the only things that motivated people. Now, he might be partly to blame, but also the institution where he studied and was trained shares some of that responsibility, in the sense the responsibility to instill the idea that gaining knowledge is a value-driven goal. Applying that to Muslim societies, one could argue that the primary then leadership challenge is the development of professionals who possess the capacity for excellence, but also whose hearts are firmly connected to God. Those who can discern a productive path in life while steadfastly resisting temptations and the competition for personal luxury and opulence. Muslim societies today are facing, and as we have heard from the presentation of Professor Asma, most notably now, facing the primary challenge of managing the influences of modernization and globalization while maintaining their religious and social values. To strike this balance between development, economic development, social development, and also achieve a sustainable social and economic development. To strike this balance, one needs to go back to that enduring challenge and how to achieve that. Here where I could emphasize the role of faith rather than religion. And because Professor Riemann used the word religion, I would rather substitute that with the expression of faith. Religion is more structured, more communal, and it follows certain procedures. While faith, in my view, is an inspiration that could help human beings to realize their purpose in life and basically their accountability in the hereafter. So for Muslim societies, it is very important to strike this balance in order to get this leadership tailored to its development needs. There is a verse in the Quran, or there are several verses in the Quran, but I'm sure you would probably explore this in more details later. Part B of the presentation is, what about the challenges and opportunities? before us in the context of the pandemic that is present at the time. The short-term financial impact, many of you would know about. The recent pandemic has created adverse economic conditions, which resulted in reduced market output, reduced business sales, and generally the economy is contracting with increased unemployment. So many new graduates may be facing a long period of uncertainty and will question probably the benefits of a university degree, and there will probably be mounting personal debts if they could not obtain the jobs that they were looking forward to secure by having a university degree. The second one is that there are travel restrictions, social distancing, and quarantine rules imposed by the national authorities. And all this have created conditions for reduced enrollment intake of international students. Here at Oxford, the expectation is that they will probably lose over 1,000 placements for this academic year. Now, this will result in a significant decline of student fee income and even research income to universities. So there will be financial pressures, immediate financial pressures, not just for a year, but probably for longer than that. And this will place constraints on how much universities can afford to invest in research and recruitment of high caliber faculty. Longer term impacts, one could start possibly by pointing or underlining the fact that digital learning will be enhanced, either globally with global knowledge hubs or a network of micro campuses formed by a partnership of local universities. Of course, this will require an expansion of digital learning modes and associated infrastructure. I can only give some examples. There is the Oxford-Princeton Alliance, which provides seed funding for joint research projects and student exchange. This will probably be thriving on the conditions that are prevalent nowadays. Then there is the League of European Research University, which is an association of 23 leading research-intensive universities, again sharing research in the fields of environment, energy, climate, food, nanotechnology. These are some of the fields that they are jointly working on. And within Europe, there is the European, which started with the three universities, Oxford, Leiden, and Bologna in 1993, but now, of course, has a much wider network, and it is set up as a consortium of leading European university institutions. So all these call them knowledge hubs and will expand their cooperation and their networking and their joint research projects in the current climate using digital learning modes. There will also be a tendency to accelerate the emergence of research-centered institutions. And I give just one example, which is the Princeton Center for Complex Materials. This is where interdisciplinary research projects will help develop cutting-edge research ideas. For example, the Princeton Center for Complex Materials combine the material science with electronics and electronic engineering. And this kind of cross-border collaboration will expand, and we will see more interdisciplinary research projects coming up. In one particular instance, the Princeton Center, for example, has combined faculty members from 6 departments working together to produce state-of-the-art solutions to the electronic industry. So the research centers are present nowadays, but they will accelerate their programs, and perhaps we will see more of them coming up in the future. Coming back to the synergies between humanities and science and technology, one should state that technologies evolve within a setting of social, economic, and business norms. Technological projects and services are shaped by the background of societal values and institutional cultures, as much as they are shaped in the foreground by the application of science and engineering. And therefore, this is a good time to question some of the deeply ingrained assumptions that have become or have taken roots and have become part of contemporary science and business culture. I offer some suggestions. The idea, is there a space for spirituality in business or in companies or in the workplace, for example? The notion that there is no place for God in the workplace, one could examine that and to see to what extent this is helpful to human progress. One could also look at issues or debate issues relating to, for example, patenting life-saving drugs and preventing humanity from saving lives. Is human life a commodity? Can we talk about this? Food and genetically modified crops, chemical industries, waste management, and environmental pollution. So whenever there is a commercial interest that impacts humans, animals, or the environment, humanities can add value to the debate. And this is where it becomes important to engage with the study of the humanities. I mentioned the spiritual capital concept, and Professor Fogel emphasized the immaterial assets in societies, and they would enrich economic development. Now, in order to produce leaders that can engage with all these, call them points of contention, debate, and discussion with an open mind, one will have to emphasize that becoming a more effective leader often requires aligning behavior with values. Adjusting mindsets is very important. And this is not an easy task to do. Sometimes adjusting mindsets is beyond what people feel is their comfort zone. In 2014, the World Economic Forum convened the Global Agenda Council on Values to support the forum's work in shaping the future of the world's most complex agenda. Can we afford to have segregated job markets? Can we afford to have low-skilled, low-pay versus high-skilled, high-pay communities? What about the concentration of wealth and income disparity and inequality? These are some of the issues that were debated. Now, that council, the Global Agenda Council on Values, concluded that for strong economic growth to take root, it must be accompanied by strong values-based leadership. It was empirically shown, and I repeat that, it was empirically shown that values-based business strategies improve companies' financial performance in however measure you use it, whether it's return on equity, return on assets, net profit. It can actually improve companies' financial performance. It only needed that visionary leadership to make the difference. And there are examples, Banco Real of Brazil, which is a banking institution, or in Malaysia, there is Senviro, which is a sustainable waste management and a renewable energy company, which has led the field of values in companies. The pandemic has created the conditions for human compassion and solidarity to flourish. This had a humanizing and humbling effect on people across the globe. And despite its tragic human cost, it has produced some positive results for humanity at large. And therefore, one should use this momentum in a more constructive way to promote the values of cooperation, of sympathy, of empathy, and of coming together as a whole human, global human society. And demonstrate relevance, basically, for what we see in nowadays science, technology, or business environment. Now, we need therefore to ask, what is of value or added value to society? Whether we are scientists, engineers, technologists, or social scientists, economists, we need always to go back to the basic question, what is of value or added value to society in whatever we do? If we have this kind of question at the heart of our academic and learning institutions, we also then need to reflect on how do we educate, train people tomorrow, meaning in 2020 or 2021, when we know that they are likely to be at the peak of their professional productivity in 20 years' time. What kind of scientists, technologists, social scientists, and others we would like to see operating at the helm of their professions in the next 20 years? There are unprecedented challenges. Social, technological change is taking place, and therefore we need to take that into consideration. How should future leaders in science and technology learn to understand and apply the principles of ethical leadership, and always ask what is of value to society and what is of added value to society, and how can I make a contribution to that? I should just point out the publication that came out of OUP entitled The Future of the Professions and How Technology Will Transform the Work of Human Experts. It's an interesting read which shed the light of how the future professions, legal, accountants, architectural, even healthcare professionals, how their work environment how will their priorities be impacted by technological change in the future. Of course, there are many issues that we can discern of concern to us, such as the issue of privacy, confidentiality, security, liability, accountability, as well as, for example, the issue of empathy and how do we deal with it, because empathy is a human capability rather than a machine capability. So how do we address this in our future societies? I think I'll leave you with all these. There are more questions than answers, but I hope, I was hoping that by raising these questions, we will create a climate of intuitive thinking, reflection, and consideration. And thank you for listening.
Interesting question that you leave us with. Tough questions. Not sure whether the other two panel would have the answer to that. But I guess we may allocate another 20-30 minutes for dialogue, with the intentions of trying to put all this in together. Maybe to start with, we have seen three ways of looking at the issues, with Prof. Raymond giving the purpose, the idea of universities, and Prof. Asma tried to reflect this on a very practical ideas, and then Prof. Basil put it up back to what should be the role of spirituality and etc. So with that, I guess maybe if I can ask this general question to start with, to put us back in the frame, in a common frame, the issues that we try to look at is issues of integration, synergy between the three functions. And then we would like to see how can that be achieved. So my question to the three panels to start the dialogue is that, is it possible for us to really integrate the three components, or we might end up having a model that is not collectively bringing up something that we may, like Raymond was referring to just now, like a pseudo science, a pseudo humanisms, or even a pseudo universities. So if I may get any response from all the three panels to start with, and then we open to the general question from the public. Maybe to start with Raymond to respond on that.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I think you should not do that. And the reason is that Professor Asma had a wonderful presentation, which I liked very much, and I strongly want to believe in ex-Oriental looks, you know, that the light will again come from the east to the west. We are very much in need of some light. But when you were using this metaphor of the tree and the trunk, you did not talk about the roots. And the roots are the first thing. They are the first principle, not the trunk, the roots. And the argument I made, referring to the whole idea of a university based on the people who first had this idea of a university, those humanists in the 14th and 15th century, they were talking about the roots. And the roots of the idea of a university is indeed that kind of character formation out of which new things can grow. And the whole idea is that when you also referred to Einstein, I also mentioned Einstein. Einstein is the perfect example of a genius, of a scholar, who was very well aware of the roots. And because of his roots, he was, first of all, in many ways, a moral human being. I mean, he also had his flaws, but he was a moral human being. He was value-oriented. He was a specialist, but he was, you know, he had this wide range of things. What is going wrong nowadays with higher education is, first of all, that we forgot taking care for the roots. We forgot taking care for what the idea of university is all about. Second thing is that when I was listening to the presentations of Professor Asma and Professor Basil, it is still thinking within the mindset of nowadays universities. I hear you talking about how to measure things. Well, the key things in life are not to be measured. You cannot measure love. You cannot measure compassion. You cannot measure goodness. You cannot measure quality. No, quality is related to time. It's not based on numbers. There are reference to the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum is the high ground of corruption. It's the high ground of corruption. It's complete nonsense to make them a reference for anything. So there's my plea would be, and there was some very important points to be made, but let's have the courage to go back to the idea of university, to take care for roots so that we can have a new tree. And out of this new tree, we will get people who are very good in science, in medicine, in economics, in politics, or whatsoever. But they have this base, which we are now missing. And for Professor Bessel, yes, you know, faith can be a very important thing. In fact, the founder of European humanism, Petrarch, was a deeply religious man. And for him, faith was extremely important. But we also know that faith itself, you know, look, most of the very faithful people in America are supporting Mr. Trump, right? Those evangelicals. And we all know, you know, about forms of fundamentalism. And we cannot ignore the fact that they are very faithful people, but they're also very dangerous. And again, the whole idea of a university is that you give people that kind of education where they first go, you know, into this world of questioning everything, even questioning their own faith. And out of that, something can grow. So protect the idea of a university that has nothing to do with technology. As long as it has to do with science, it has to do with the quest for truth, an honest quest for truth. And after this, after those rules, after the idea of a university, one of the branches could be that X or Y becomes a specialist in X, Y, Z. Yeah, and then it's about the society, you know, to bring these things together. But what we are very much missing now, because, you know, as we all know, scholars like Einstein have become rare. They are no longer there. That kind of education is simply no longer offered. Professor Bessel already said, you know, the financial consequences when so many students are not coming. It's part of the corruption of so-called higher education. It's all based on numbers, how much money we can make, and that you have to pay in Harvard $60,000 every year to get so-called education. It's a crime. It's simply a crime. So that it has nothing to do with education. So there's let's take care for the roots. Let's take care for the idea of university. Start something new based on the first principle. Well, we call it a renaissance. And out of that, we can get the kind of education. We need to have people, specialists, who do have the intellectual capacities and the character to create a better world. And to get rid of, you know, the people who are now quote unquote our leaders, because most of them are a complete failure, wherever, especially here in the West.
Okay, Rob, thank you so much. Prof. Asma, I'm not sure whether this is an expected birthday discussion for you, please.
I should be enjoying myself, but
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this talk. Rob, thank you very much for reminding me about the roots. I think that is a very pertinent point that you have raised. At the end of the day, you know, if we have to start all over, if I said the word reset the button, but to reset the button has a lot of variables that we have to take care of. I think it would be nice if we can have a group of people who are into education and what it should be, bring back universitas and all that, and then have that. And how now do we balance between what is the philosophy of what university is and what is the reality that is now happening, faced by all the vice chancellors, right? On one hand, they have a ministry that asks them to do X, Y, Z, and even the KPI is now coming down from the ministry. And then on the other hand, so this kind of argument, I think, has been going on for a long time. Even though we think we have the higher education blueprint and that we are going for values-based, that we try to do something possible, at least for the future generation of Malaysia, we have another problem. I mean, I'm reading the chat and they're saying, yeah, we got to uproot, we have to do all these things. But at the end of the day, let's talk reality. Reality is that there's no continuity of political will. And this is a problem to us because you start with a blueprint and then there's a change of government, and then at the end of the day, I don't know what happened. And after that, somebody comes in again and say, oh, let's start it again, but maybe we add in a little bit of why. And then it goes on. And I think all vice chancellors can go crazy like this. Because when you want to move things in a public university, political will is a very important factor as well. If you're in a private university, it's your money, you can decide what can be done by the university, and you go in and say, okay, you want values-based, and if you want to come to my university, this is what you're going to get, and this is the outcome that you're going to produce. But if you come to a public university where it is still, majority is still money coming from the government, this is not easy to have what you call complete freedom to do what needs to be done. And that is, I think, the crux of it. I said to Professor Karim, I wish that I could see something at the end of the day regarding what the blueprint can create out of learned values-based talent. I mean, we talk about this all the time, but we have never seen the first graduate because the political continuity is not there to allow the blueprint to continue. We even have to come to the point whether the blueprint is going to be continued or not to be continued. And that leaves all the university back to square one. Like, what do we do now? So this kind, I think, somewhere along the line, that's why I'm saying that perhaps higher education should now be controlled by another high commissioner for education or something, but not from politician, because they change all the time and they change the mindset, and things just don't get to continue. So I think I will stop there for now, Zainal, because like I said, we went to UNESCO with the blueprint. The UNESCO people actually read the blueprint and actually said this is one of the best things they've read. And actually, among all, Shift 1 is the one that is unique regarding Malaysian higher education blueprint, because there's no country that guarantee, but Malaysians guarantee that the future generation of Malaysia will be learned values-based talent. And that is what we see in continuity, how we nurture a human being and not train a human capital. So, but it never got to see to fruition. And this is the sad part, because if we can see to fruition, then we will say whether universitas did happen in the universities in Malaysia or not. I'll stop there for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Asma. I'm sure Dr. Prof. Basil would have a lot to respond. But before that, I just want to read a bit of the chat box. Prof. Karim, for example, is questioning, is referring again to the roots and also stating that if you want to look at the root, whether it's right one or not, you've got to uproot them, whether we can afford to change the systems and etc. So with that remark, maybe Prof. Basil would like to respond to the questions, or even any response to what have been said by the previous two speakers.
Let me be an advocate for a central idea which I have been pursuing, encouraging, and promoting. It starts with the saying that humanity has not found a better way to inspire change than role modeling. Even in any academic institution, people will say, look at Professor Asma, look at Professor Riemann and what they are doing, and that. So it draws inspiration from models, role models. And in a Muslim context, really, the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad has been a revered source of religious knowledge and moral teaching for centuries. It can also become, and this is the important point, it can also become a valuable source for human development and learning in a much wider context. So I think if we give that some attention, some focus, it will require some, again, interdisciplinary research between religious studies departments and departments of, say, economics or business studies. I'm sure that it will yield a very promising results. So I would like really to offer a very practical suggestion that we look at the seerah of the Prophet and how that can be used in a contemporary context. In addition to that, when we look at key performance indicators, and Professor Asma mentioned that in her speech, and within an academic setting, they will look at students, programs, faculty, what they published, financials, grant or funded research. We can also add two other dimensions, and these are practical ones. One is service to the community, and the other one is promoting sustainability. If we add these, then we will have some practical measures whereby to assess the progression or the advancement towards a more humane academic institutions that operate within our societies.
Okay, Prof. Thank you so much. So we would like to hear from the audience. Anyone would like to ask questions, and there is one hand raised. Farah, are you still around? Or anyone would like to address any question to any of the three panel? Just unmute your mic and then speak up.
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Waalaikumsalam. Can you mention your name?
I'm Sohaimi Bhamasari from the School of Economics from IIM.
Okay.
I would like to ask Prof. Rob about the commercialization in higher education. Actually, money is very important, Prof, in higher education. Proven that universities that based on their own their own endowment, they cannot survive in this age, because everything is very expensive. Scientific equipment, everything all expensive. Manpower, the salary of even now the salary of academicians are also below the market rate. People work for 20 years, still receiving a very low salary. So what else do you expect? The government asking for ROI, return on the money that they give. Now you are asking us to go back to the real university. Real university means you have to be ideal and to be independent. But in reality, we are depending on the government, the taxpayers' money. Taxpayers would like to know how much they can get in terms of the return on investment. So what do you think, Prof. Rob, in this matter? Thank you.
Rob, did you get the question?
Yes, yeah, sure. No, well, it's a very good question, which goes to to the heart of the conversation we are having. Here is the thing: we have two possibilities. Or we continue with what we are doing now, with politics highly involved, and Professor Asma is completely right, and it's not only a Malaysian problem; it's everywhere. politicians are serving their own interests, not even the interests of their party, they're serving their own interests, want to have a little say in things, and they are not interested in changing anything, because if we really would change, those whole political class will be gone, right? So we have to keep in mind, quote unquote, the elites will not solve our problems because they are not interested to solve the problems, because they will be gone at the very moment we solve the problems. Okay. We can accept it, but then nothing will change. So we don't have a choice. We have to take things in our own hands. Now remember, one of my heroes, Petrarch, the founder of European humanism, this man with an idea of the idea of university, he then talked about the studia honesta, the honest study. And he thought about it as a small community of people who were coming together and educate themselves by reading the classics. It's not that difficult, you know, that we, like in the concept of a kind of monastery, secular monasteries, whatever, people come together, start reading classics and educate themselves, because that's still possible. And then you do this higher education thing and get yourself a profession or whatsoever. But then in the meantime, you are aware of what is called in America the BS, right? The bullshit. I mean, because there's so much nonsense going around. So it's time to take our fate in our own hands and create, again, small communities. Look, in Europe, after the Dark Ages, after those very difficult periods, we got out of it because of, you know, small numbers, some individuals who decide, okay, we have to do things in, and that's what we have to do right now. Don't count on politics, don't count on business, don't count on any of people in power, because we don't change anything. We have to do it ourselves, and we can easily do it.
Thank you, Rob. I guess Tan Sri Zul, the rector, is trying to ask questions or to share insights or comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much for your very illustrative and inspiring. I missed you in Barcelona, so I get to hear you again here in Malaysia. I agree with you. I think we should not depend on anybody. And this is where I think the United Nations University that created another model called the Regional Centers of Expertise of Sustainable Development in trying to remodel what a future university looks like based on all the things that we have mentioned, going back to the first principle. And I hope that is one area that we can work on to rebuild the university as well. But my question for you is basically your allusion to there was a Islamic university before the Universitas. The Universitas come on, I think, on the 11th century with the University of Bologna. There was then an Islamic university in Andalusia, in Baghdad, and the place of that nature. Now, my question to you is, how do the Islamic university lost ground? Why does the Islamic university do not push forward as a model of a university? Where have they gone wrong? What we can learn from them in trying to create another model for the post COVID era as well? Can you give some analysis on that one? Thank you very much.
Well, I feel very humble to deal with this question. Let me first say this. Before the universities or the idea of university as Petrarch thought about it, you had the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. We had the amazing library in Alexandria, which was put in fire by a Christian fundamentalist. But so the idea of, you know, houses of learning has always been there, and I also agree with Professor Bessel. It was at least an idea of Aristotle, who said, well, you learn most from an example, from a living example, as they could do it in the Platonic Academy, etc., etc., etc. It's not only in the world of the Islam that they lost their eye on the first principles. Here in the West, it's probably even worse. It's probably even worse. So I think it's global mindset. It's a global mindset, and for a variety of reasons. First of all, we human beings are social beings, And one of the things we are always afraid of is to be the outsider. In general, people want to be part of everybody. We are striving, we are eager for recognition, just not to feel alone, just to be part of it. And so, but you know, who are the people who make the changes? The people who are not afraid to be the outsider, who are not afraid to act according to a certain truth. Well, that's already the case with the main religious people, Prophet Muhammad, Jesus Christ, the Buddha, etc., etc., etc. And the second thing we have to realize is that we are hypnotized by this mindset of the World Economic Forum. You know, Industrial Revolution 4.0. You know, and that technology, and I mean, it's in my Christian faith, we talk about the Holy Spirit. It has been replaced. The Holy Spirit is now the Holy Spirit of science, technology, and money. And with science and technology and money, incarnated by Mr. Bill Gates, we can solve all the problems. It is simply not true. So let's use our intellectual qualities and recapture some of our intellectual integrity to say things how they are, right? I mean, that this present mindset is creating the problems, will not solve the problems. That this World Economic Forum is not interested in saving the world, but they are only interested in saving their own interest. And that, as it has been before, yes, we lost the Platonic Academy, we lost monasteries, there were many things we lost, but we can rebuild. We can rebuild, and you can do it in your world, we can do it in our world, and then we will eventually again go to this conclusion of what the great philosopher Karl Jaspers wrote about the actual age. And once upon a time, with Confucius in China, Buddha in India, Muhammad in the Arabic world, the Jewish prophets, and the Greek philosophers, in this mindset between 800 before Christ till 400 before Christ, there was this idea that human dignity comes first. Before business, before politics, before science, before technology, human dignity comes first. And when we recapture this idea and start building it from the ground, I'm sure, you know, we can change the world, but no longer accept the things as they are and the mindset as it is now.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Tansfi, you have a follow-up question?
Well, give others a chance, otherwise I'll come back.
Okay, all right. Prof. Karim, I see you're raising the virtual hand.
Thank you, Dr. Zainal. Can you hear me?
Yes, go on.
Okay. Okay. On one hand, we want to realize the real philosophy of universitas and going back to the first principle, and also the philosophy of education in the true sense. But on the other hand, the schools and public universities have to operate under certain situation dictated by the ministry. So how do we reconcile between these two?
Is this for me?
Yeah, Prof. Karim, are you addressing any
yeah, well, listen, look, no, but again, again, go back to the first principle of your own religion, right? It was a revolutionary step of Prophet Muhammad to say, well, you know, we have to think and we have to act in a different way. There is no writing on the wall that we have to accept things as they are now. So there's and we have all opportunities, you know, as long as we are not living in a totalitarian society, and thank God we are not, you know, not in Malaysia, not in my country, it's still not totalitarian, so we still can change things. It's all, and the change has to start in our own mind. And so a long time ago, with my Nexus Institute, every year we organize conferences which are kind of intellectual operas. We have symposia, we have lectures, And once upon a time, I had the daughter of Nobel Prize winner Thomas Mann and Elizabeth Mann-Borghese, who was basically she was the grandmother of the environmental movement. She started thinking about this already in the 60s. A brave, wonderful person who was the first one to speak about climate change and why the environment is essential for the whole mankind. Anyway, I could convince her to give a lecture in 1999 with a topic her father spoke about in 1950, the years of my life. The years of my life, her father started with, okay, I don't want to talk about my private life, but I want to speak about what happened in my lifetime. And so Elizabeth, the royal family was there, more than 1,000 people listening to this lady already then in her 80s to talk about what happened in her lifetime. And again, she did many things. She's the grandmother of the environmental movement. And at the end of the lecture, she said something which I never forgot. She said, the realist of now will be dead tomorrow. The utopians will be the realist of tomorrow. Get back something of a utopian mindset, because we don't get anywhere with being a realist. Realist will be dead tomorrow. The utopians will be the realist of tomorrow.
Can I say something?
Yes, Prof. Go on.
Yes. I think we are at the risk of piling so many layers of ideas on top of each other. I would like to make a distinction between education of a human being and universities. Universities basically serve the purpose of providing for the acquisition of knowledge and skills. Education of a human being is much more wider in context than the university. There are many stakeholders, there are many partners in this, including the mosque, the society, the family, the extended family, the elders. So I think one should separate in a way in our minds between what the university is expected to do within its limited resources and remit and the education of a human being. And I actually remember very clearly when I first came to Oxford, one of the famous philosophers was saying, I will not allow my schooling to interfere with my education. And that's a famous saying. I will not allow my schooling to interfere with my education, which means education for him is much wider than going to a college or a university. I think we should be clear about this. And on the question which Professor Zulrazak has raised, what happened to the universities or education in Muslim societies in the past, probably a reflection on the fact that embracing and empowering a knowledge culture was part and parcel of the faith of Muslim societies in those days. And they therefore provided, Muslim societies and its leaders, they provided that freedom from fear and freedom from want, which are prerequisites for any learning endeavor to flourish and produce results. Now that freedom, or those freedoms from fear, have been eroded due to outside kind of interference and invasions, say from the Mughals when they destroyed Baghdad and its libraries, or from within Muslim societies by rulers who were persecuting their population. And therefore, that has eroded and took with it that privilege of living in a knowledge culture in Muslim societies, which resulted in, of course, the decline in learning institutions and learning in general.
I would like to add to that. Can I, Zainab?
Yes, Prof. There's actually questions to you too.
Okay. basically Karim asked the question, how can we reconcile? And I like what Prof. Basil had mentioned just now, that maybe we should separate between education of a human being and what the university can do. Once he said that, I think as a former VC of USM, as an Apex university, I can see that happening. Because what the ministry can control is basically what the university does. But what the university, what the ministry does not control is what the university can do in the training of and nurturing of a human being. And this is where we say that the Apex agenda, which was started by Tan Sri Zul in USM, and we see that when we start to inculcate HEBAT, which is holistic entrepreneurial balance, articulate thinking graduate, to move now the attitudes of the student, how now when they go out to the community, what will be a difference that USM student will now show compared to other universities. We see that difference because the students are very proud of it. And when you ask them, why do you want to come to USM? Because it's an Apex university, because it's a university with a difference that will now be able to nurture a human being. And they, at the end of the day, in the recent poll from the employability, we find that USM is number 1. Tan Sri, USM is number 1. Okay, in the sense of employability, it means that the companies are now saying, when the recruiters, when I ask the recruiters, what is it that you see about the USM student? Because they were recruiting all the other university students as well to their companies. And they see that the engineers essentially are with a difference, because the engineering students from USM would now be able to now articulate the humanitarian part of being an engineer, that they are not just providing solutions for engineering, they are providing solutions for humanity. I think whatever we have done, that change is something that is uniquely can be done by universities, that perhaps to inculcate especially the attitude, the attributes of being balanced between knowledge and character. The fact that when we brought about community engagement, and we now have APUSEN, more than 140 universities are with us from around the world, Asia Pacific University. And then I realized that there are so many universities that can help humanity. And there are many that have the same mindset. So what I'm trying to say is that once we separate, then whatever I have to say about political will be what the university is doing, but what we say about education is something else. And that, I think, is a room for universities to be different, for universities to now make that change and to move in terms of
questions.
Sana, can I make a very quick comment on what Professor Basil just said?
Yes, go on.
Because I don't mind, and I think it's perfectly okay to make a distinction between human education and universities, but then be honest. Don't call it the university anymore, because it's not providing the knowledge of university. Call it higher education for X, Y, Z, technology, science, whatever, but please don't present a lie and don't say that you are presenting a university, because it's not a university.
Okay, thank you. Prof. Asma, to be fair, I think we have collected a few questions. There is one question direct direct to you, asking about, okay, the last one. You can see it on the screen. Community engagement has been included in some undergraduate curriculum in some universities in Malaysia. How do we encourage for more curriculum program in other universities to include this value-based and experiential-based educations? Please, Prof.
Yeah, basically, as far as the blueprint is concerned, it already states that the community engagement should be part and parcel of the curriculum. It is how fast the universities, TNCA or BGIM or whatever can now pick it up and put it as part and parcel. And I think USM has been the initiator as designated by AKEPT before, to now teach or train the various people involved in community engagement how to now make sure it takes off in your university and that it now becomes part and parcel of the curriculum. So to me, that experiential learning is very, very important, because this is where you now begin to understand, to connect the dots, because you are in the classroom, you understand physics, you understand chemistry, you understand mathematics, but at the end of the day, it's not about physics providing the solution, it's about the whole gamut of knowledge now being connected to, you have to connect the dots in order to now provide what is the solution that is needed. And one thing about community engagement is that you give the fishing rod and not the fish, yeah, because this is very important because it's teaching the students how to create a sustainable change. It's not telling the student knowledge transfer. I mean, I have the knowledge, I come from university, I'm telling you how this is to be done. But rather, this is it's a two-way street. We teach the student, you've got to learn as much as you are also telling the community how to do things. So this is a knowledge assimilation that needs to be there in order to create knowledge for change. And it is a together concept. So this kind of community engagement, at the end of the day, when you interview these students, they are more mature. They are more mature in how they handle things, and how they are in how they interact, because the interpersonal skills that they have accumulated by working with the community, they picked it up and they become better. And while they are there, they are always in a multidisciplinary group, and that means that science students are learning from the arts, and the art students are also learning from the science, and together I think it was I find that it was the students show a very good response to community engagement.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. I guess that's the time that we have. We wish we can continue. If it is in the morning, we can maybe continue a bit more. But as a take home, if we can, as a matter of like leaving us with important message to all the panel, if you got one magic wand, magic stick, what would you advise us to do? I mean, what is the next action that we can do? Rob?
The best and only thing to be done in the past, in the present, and in the future is for everybody who wants to live their life as an intellectual, have a holy commitment to truth and nothing else.
Okay, thank you. Holy commitment to truth. Prof. Asma?
I think at the end of the day, when I go to the university, whatever that I gain from there, I want to make sure that I will do things for public good. That whatever knowledge I have, it is now going to be able to create change, sustainable change in society. Because then I think I can go to sleep and say, yeah, I've done what I need to be done as a human being.
Okay. Thank you. Prof. Basil, last remark.
Identify a role model or models for the promotion of values-based leadership in every sector, whether it's the economy or whether it's education. It will make a practical difference.
Okay, all right, everyone, thank you so much. We still have a number of at least 100 enthusiast audience around. Yeah, I'm sure they would like to listen more if you allow to have more time. Thank you, Prof. Rob Ryman, Prof. Asma, Prof. Basil, Prof. Nordin, the main organizer for the seminars, Higher Education Leadership Academy, and all the audience. We will have another sessions on Monday, on the 22nd, yeah, on higher education and sustainable development. So we look forward to see you all again, and that's all we have today. So inshallah, hopefully we learn a lot and we can put it into practice. A very good afternoon, very good morning to Rob and Basil. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Zainal.
Yes.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all.